the market shares in the phone market never really change. You've got people with a bigger market share, people with a smaller market share, and ultimately everyone knows that. Or I assume they should know between the air is if you want to cut prices, the other person will just cut prices as well. So it sort of becomes self-detrimental. And so the question I've got is, if the AA were to go up with price, and clearly they have increased prices every year. There's obviously quite an aggressive retention policy. Is the strategy going to be for both of them just to increase prices? And therefore, again, there's green flag who are there, but in terms of sort of brand and coverage, the RSC and the AAs will always be sort of king and queen of the market, as it were. And so it seems to me there'll be no irrational pricing there. And therefore, another way to get additional, I'm just thinking about in terms of additional margin, that you use your vans more as a retailer in terms of selling batteries, and other sort of products. And again, I'd be quite interested in your view around the whole telemetry market, because we've seen it in other industries where it sounds great, it looks great, it does tell a good story, but actually it's just not as effective as actually having, overall good systems. And again, it enables you to forecast when a battery will break. So then if you're close to your customer anyway, you'll know the average age of the battery anyway. And so you actually don't really need the telemetry to tell you that. And just, again, because you'd have garnered the data from the car, when these things fail and yada, yada, yada. I'm just wondering about your views on that, and the whole, again, it seems that, the whole using the van as a retail unit is a very good idea in terms of gaining more margin. How much more do you think you can do with that business? Because clearly margins are very high today, they're sort of 50%. What else do you think they can do?
I think it'll be difficult on the retail side from the van perspective. I think that there's a lot going on there anyway, and the guys out in the vans are heavily targeted on those KPIs. As far as the system's concerned, I'll probably come back to some of the other challenges in a second, but there's still, I would say, a worry in the marketplace within the year around who owns the data. So you mentioned either telematics, or they've recently launched the Car Genie, or I think it was last year, wasn't it, where they can start to predict breakdowns. The idea there wasn't so much from a retail perspective, but was around potentially reducing costs, because with a lot of the connected cars now, and there was a technical team looking at this where you can actually do virtual breakdowns, so you can reboot cars over the phone or through the dashboard itself, rather than actually needing to send somebody out. So I think the market is generally changing anyway. So your traditional breakdowns, whilst they're still going to happen, you're going to need probably a more technical mechanic in the background for some of the other stuff, especially with all of the systems that are on the cars. The challenge which the EA were concerned about was who owns the data. So that's one of the reasons why the Car Genie was launched, because data is being fired out of the connected cars, a lot of modern vehicles at the minute, and going straight back to the manufacturer, cutting the AA and the RAC out. So they were always keen to either get hold of that data or be responsible for that data, or to create the data themselves, hence the Car Genie. So it's definitely an area of potential there, but I would say less so on the retail perspective, but more so on the use of the data and who's going to actually own that, and what sort of expertise you then need in the background to resolve any issues that data is actually coming up with.
One question I've got, and I haven't actually asked anyone about this, and I was kind of just thinking about this in terms of, if you look at a car and, the tech in a car and how things are going to change over time. Because to me, if you look at the car and anyone's ownership, in the good old days, it will always be a case of, things in the car would break, and, breakdowns in the past were, higher and whatnot, and, cars have clearly got better, but also cars have got a lot more tech in, so better at braking, better at predicting accidents, all of that sort of stuff. But just in terms of all that tech that sits in a car, how vulnerable is any of that? And, in terms of problem systems being rebooted or whatever. Again, I've sort of had, we had a sort of relatively new Golf, I've got a new Audi as well. These things tend to be quite robust. Is there any sort of market in that for the AA, or any potential there, or is that just, sort of by the by?
No. I think there's probably two things there. One on the prediction of breakdown. So, and again, there's two areas there. You may find in a new Audi, for example, there may be a breakdown button